Women in Business webinar series. Today is entitled The Great Leveller. And 2020, I'm sure you'll all agree, has been the year of COVID. And you might not know this, but back in May, it also marked the 50th anniversary of the Equal Pay Act. And we'll also see Robert Half sponsoring the Women in Business Expo for the second year. So as a business, Robert Half, we're founded on the principle of putting ethics first. It's important to us that we recognise this pivotal time and champion a great event that does so much to support women in the workplace, whether they're returning from a career break, advancing their career, looking to start a new business or grow an existing one. I probably should add that I'm Steve Sully as well. Am I still here? Still here, Matt?
We can still see you and hear you.
Yeah, I probably should have added as well at the beginning. I'm Steve Sully. I'm the director for our London business. That's a pretty important point to have missed. But we're delighted to be hosting a series of roundtable events with a panel of inspiring women to discuss their career milestones, challenges, and opportunities they faced in business to date. Thank you to all of them, namely Laura, Jess, Kay, Wendy, and Naintara, for taking the time to join us, and we look forward to hearing from you. And I understand that you're going to introduce yourself far better than I could, because I couldn't even introduce me. But over to our very own powerhouse, Jenny Lynch, who's our Vice President of Marketing and PR for Robert Half across our entire international zone. Over to you, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Steve. I can't believe you didn't mention your name, but really, really great to have you on our very early morning session. Thank you so much for joining before 9 o'clock. It's probably early for a few of you. So just before we do some intros, I wanted just to welcome everyone to what's going to be a really interesting discussion. We've got some really diverse backgrounds, different sectors that we've worked across, and some really successful business women who are going to share some interesting stories as we debate for the next hour. Matt is on hand. Matt Robinson, hi. Say hi. And Matt's going to be helping us just keep an eye on questions that you might have, and also help us run some polls as we go through the discussion. Matt, maybe you do a quick intro and any tips for the respondents that are listening.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm Matt Robinson. I work for our staff development department. I'm one of the training managers looking after our corporate learning for the international zone. So I'm producing this today. So I'm running the presentation, etc., behind the scenes. As Jenny said, there is a Q&A box that you will see at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions that you want to ask any of the panelists today, as we go through, please put your questions into that Q&A box, because we do have some time set aside at the end of this for us to answer some live Q&A. So if you feel inspired by what's being spoken about, put your questions to the panel, and I'll host that at the end of this session.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt.
No worries.
So we're recording this, and we recorded yesterday's session. It's going to go up on our website. We have an advice section on the website, and we'll put it out on social channels. It's actually a really good listen, yesterday's session. So I would advise you to take a look at that as well. But do come back to this and share this with people afterwards if you think the topics are really interesting. So I think rather than me do the intros, I'm going to hand off to our very amazing panel that we have here. We've got 5 women. So perhaps I can maybe ask Jess, first of all, to do a quick intro as to her background and why maybe this topic is quite interesting to her.
Sure, thanks, Jenny. Morning, everybody, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name's Jess Payne. I'm currently working for a company called SMT. Just joined this company actually during COVID, which was an interesting move and probably a brave move for most people who want to change companies. But I work for SMT as a head of HR for their Great British unit. In terms of what we do at SMT, we provide a full service distribution company specialising in machinery and trucks. And provide that to the construction, material handling, waste handling, and transport industry. So as head of HR, I've had a career in HR probably about 20 years, mostly within the manufacturing and logistics industries, so quite male-dominated industries. And although I've worked for some very large organisations over those 20 years, I also spent about 6 years out of the corporate world, bringing up my 2 children when they were very young. I took some time at that point to also work for myself. So I've had a sort of varied experience from a career point of view. In terms of my interest and why I'm here today, I've got an interest in equality, diversity and inclusion. I think that was probably captured at quite an early age. Coming from a single parent family, coming from a sort of very mixed heritage through the generations, always felt a little bit different. Didn't quite know why. And then starting a career in quite male-dominated industries, wanting to be successful, often felt like I had to change the way I acted or behaved a little bit to be successful. And again, I think only through maturity and probably the time we're in now, I've been able to look back on that and think, well, maybe things could have been a little bit different. I think the last 5 years have really sort of changed in terms of inclusion and diversity, and I felt quite emboldened to I guess, bring my whole self to work and be authentic to me. And I think, you know, there's much work going on around that, which is really, you know, made me want to be a part of it, and that's, you know, what my interest and exactly why I'm here today.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Jess. I think we're going to have some really interesting discussion. So thank you for the intro. How about I turn to Laura next? Laura, are you on?
Yes, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Laura Brambilla, Group CFO at Octo Telematics, a leading global and international provider for telematics service with this big IoT data analytics, advanced data analytics for insurance service, fleet, and smart mobility. I've been in telecommunication industry and engineering and listed company as a CFO of EMEA, Europe, UK, Middle East, Africa, and India. In the past years, I've been also spending time out of finance in supply chain, quality, sales operation in several roles. I've been really truly a global international citizen. I've been living in London, Italy, Paris, and traveling across EMEA, Middle East, Africa, Russia, and US. And I've been also part of a board, the international board. So in my career, my professional path, I've been leading in truly international and global teams where diversity was the standard in terms of passport, gender, and inclusion has always been a key success factor for our performance. So I'm particularly keen on the topic, and I'm a strong believer and supporter of actionable initiatives to evolve on this inclusion and diversity item, especially in these days. So I'm particularly glad to be here.
Oh, that's brilliant. We've got a real international dimension to the conversation today. That's going to be really interesting. Wendy, how about we turn to you next?
Good morning, and I'm Wendy Schoonjans, originally from Belgium as well. So a bit international here. I've worked in marketing for large multinationals such as Unilever and Visa, and then SMEs as well for about 20 years, and I've held a variety of executive leadership positions. 2 years ago, I set up my own marketing consulting agency, which was going quite well until COVID hit us all. And most of my clients were impacted or being furloughed, or their businesses were being closed down. So when lockdown was imminent, I joined forces with one of them and set up a charity to provide meals to the elderly, the vulnerable, and the homeless in our communities. And so I worked on this charity 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, non-stop, didn't see my children. So it was a lot more work than I had anticipated, but it was extremely rewarding. And this obviously had a huge impact on our family family life, especially with schools being closed. So COVID essentially reversed our family dynamic. So I became, you know, I've always been a hardworking woman, don't get me wrong, but I became fully immersed in this lockdown, you know, charity. And my husband became the full-time dad, looking after the kids, homeschooling them, doing all the household work. So yeah, I've been very lucky with COVID, really. And so recently, on the 1st of September, I started a new job as a global marketing director for CyDen, beauty tech devices. And so yeah, it's been an interesting journey so far to start a new job in this new post-COVID virtual workplace.
Interesting. Maybe you should do another session on starting a new job in the pandemic, because it sounds like we've got some experience in our panel. Thank you, Wendy. Yeah. How about we turn to Naintara?
Hi, my name is Naintara Argarwal, and I work for QBE as their group head of underwriting performance. I have mostly worked in my 20+ careers in a male-dominated industry. And I recently joined QBE late November and have spent most of my time at home because of Christmas and then the lockdown. Besides having a full-time job, I have 2 little children, and this pandemic has been extremely interesting and challenging because just as many others have said, managing a full-time job and managing being at home as a full-time mom has had its own issues. But I also think that we've had an opportunity, and I've had an opportunity to spend some really great time with my family, something that I hadn't done in the last 10 or so years. I feel very strongly about diversity and inclusion at the workplace. So I'm really excited to be here and join this great panel for a great discussion.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Kay.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I guess a little bit about me. I'm not from very exciting places. I'm from Birmingham. Apologies to the Brummies. I have worked in insurance all my life. I'm currently the CFO for a London insurance broker, wholesale broker called THB. We're owned by an American firm called Amwins, who are one of the largest wholesale brokers in the US. Like I said, I've been in insurance most of my working life. When I left university, I needed to get a job. And so I was temping at a company in their accounts payable department. And it so happened to be Abbey Life. And from there, I found that I really enjoyed accounts. I was very fortunate that my team leader found a place for me on their trainee accountancy scheme, and so I worked hard during the day on my career, and then when I went home at night I studied really hard for my exams and qualified as an accountant. So probably a slightly different way to come into accounting from most people. Most people go the big 3, as it is now, it used to be 5 route, but I didn't do that. I worked while I studied, and yeah, I feel very fortunate that I've been in the insurance industry for all that time. But as a finance person, I feel like I've been protected to a certain extent from much of the stuff that gets reported at the moment and has been reported, I guess, in the last 12 months about the insurance industry and where it is in terms of its ability to recognise the benefits of an inclusive culture. So I think for me, I would like to help to move that forward. I'd like to help more women stay in insurance. I think we have plenty of women who start in insurance and then find that they just, it's not for them for a number of different reasons. And I would like to make it easier for them to be themselves at work and to stay in insurance, because I do believe that an inclusive firm is a more profitable firm. So it's good for business. So that's me.
I think I'm really excited about this discussion. We've actually got quite a lot of people working in fairly male-dominated industries, which is an interesting perspective I think we'll have, and we've got a lot of carers and women who have lots of responsibilities at home as well as at work. So I'm not sure we need warming up, but Matt, maybe we could start with a poll just to get some engagement from our audience as well. So over to you, Matt. We have a poll that's coming up on screen. The question is, has the COVID-19 pandemic made the world more equal? And if you could give us your thoughts on this. So we've got yes, men and women can now be equals at work and home. We have the second one, it's improving. Men and women can now begin to share in career and home responsibilities. The third answer is hardly. It's a nice idea, but not a reality. And the last one, no, there is no change. And maybe I should even added in, it's getting worse, because it could be for some in this current climate. So let's see how we're getting on, Matt. Have we got a few answers coming through?
Yeah, we've got quite a few people answering. Just going to give it another couple of seconds. I'll be closing the poll in about 5 seconds.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Interesting to see what people's thoughts are on this.
Yeah, it's changed actually. The one answer was leading, but now it's moved.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to end the poll now, and then I'm going to launch the
See.
results. There you go, Jenny. You should be able to see those now.
Okay, wow, it's quite close. So
Yeah.
Hardly, it's a nice thought, but not a reality. I guess that was the one that came in at the last minute as the winner.
The one, yep.
Improving, men and women can now begin to share in career and home responsibilities. That's interesting. Maybe panelists, do you think that's a surprising result? Would you have predicted that answers from our audience?
Agreed.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. So why don't we then kind of carry on that discussion? So I think maybe I'm going to ask our panelists really more on this topic. So has the pandemic made the world more equal? Maybe Wendy, I could ask you to sort of talk us through this one to start with.
Yeah, sure. So I think I'm a bit on the fence, like most of our audience as well. So in some ways, yes. In other ways, there's still a lot of work to do, I think. So I think in terms of flexible working and home working, it's definitely improved and it's changed, dramatically. So previously, I think when women asked for flexible working hours or working from home, it would often be perceived as, we want to work less, or we want the easy route, or it's childcare related. And then there's also that element of trust. Is she truly working from home, or, are the kids just being ill and that's what she's doing? So there's always that sort of, there's always something in the background going on when you ask that question. So I think now that everyone else has experienced what it's like to work from home and the benefits of that, I think especially business leaders, I think people are now more open about the whole concept of home flexible working. And often you can get much more work done without any interruptions from colleagues popping over to your desk. So I think it certainly changed the perception of our current CEO at CyDen, who previously did not like the concept, one single bit of working from home and people working from home. And he now actually, since COVID, enjoys it so much, he's doing it quite often himself. He has a much more relaxed attitude about it, and people actually have changed contracts now where their work base is their home base. So it's really progressed in that way. And I think working from home also has a positive effect on the traditional roles of household and childcare. So I've heard many of my friends who said that during the COVID, their husbands were much more involved with, especially the homeschooling. Some parents got really, really excited about that. And I think this is emphasized even more with so many people being on furloughed or being made redundant, regardless of their sex or ethnicity or backgrounds. This has impacted everyone, and I think certainly from my perspective and my surrounding friends, it seems to have made quite a difference. And for me personally, as I said in the introductions, it's completely changed. Our COVID has reversed our family roles, with me being the full-time income provider, my husband being the stay-at-home dad. So that works perfectly for me as well, because I feel less pressure of being and less guilty of being a working mom. And because I know my kids are, they're with their dad, they're having all the love that they need. So But having said that, I think it's far from equal, and women are clearly still expected, I think, to run the household and the childcare. And I think this is apparent with my husband now going to school, dropping off the kids or picking them up, and he's actually one of the only dads who does it full time. And then when there's a problem at school, for example, the school would still call me as the mom, being the first point of contact rather than the dad who's always there. And then I think people still asking my husband, are you really happy to look after the kids? Is that really what you want rather than a job? And he really is. So it's, there's still a long way to go, I think, to become equal. But yeah, from my perspective, it's certainly been more progressive.
Really interesting. I think the challenging the stereotypes is a lot of what I've heard, and actually a lot of businesses just thinking they couldn't work in a different way before the crisis, just very fundamentally shifting their perceptions because it just had to work. So maybe Naintara, have you got anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think I agree with Wendy. I think the jury is still out there, whether COVID has been a great leveler. I agree that a lot of people were quite skeptical about the flexible arrangements, and they've overcome that hurdle quite quickly as a result of this. People can work from home and they can do it very efficiently. So that's been really positive. I think that also the fact that there has been I think, greater appreciation that there is life beyond work for both men and women, given that we've spent so much of time with our families. And I think from just dynamics of kind of meetings, I think we've made a great step in making COVID a great leveler. I feel that when we're all online and we come together to a meeting and then we go out at the same time, it leaves little room for those side conversations that were happening, where women always kind of felt left out. But I think it's not all that rosy. I think a lot of people that have lost their jobs recently are women, because those are the industries that have been impacted quite a lot. And as Wendy said, women are still shouldering most of the responsibilities. It's having 2 jobs, full-time jobs. So there's more to be done over there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and from a career perspective, I think it's going to be hard to create networks online. I think that's going to be one big challenge. We're not going to have those little coffee conversations, build our network. It's just easier to call somebody who's on Zoom. So, taking that next step is going to be harder, and we're going to need more skills. So I think there is some positive and there are some negatives.
I think I can't remember if I was debating this with you yesterday, Jess, but there's a couple of articles out from HBR and McKinsey that women's jobs are 1.8 times more vulnerable in the crisis than men's jobs, and actually they've seen a decline in redundancies more from women's roles than men. So we can still see there's some imbalance, and possibly that's around the types of careers that people have as well. No, it's interesting.
It is, and I think initially men were more affected by the disease itself, in terms of infection rates, death rates. But actually, if you look at the social impact, women have definitely been more impacted because of the types of roles that they are doing, hospitality and leisure. The social one around hairdressing, beauticians, those sorts of jobs have been heavily impacted by furlough and now redundancy. And I think that's going to get worse before it gets better. And how do we fundamentally bring inequality or equity to those sorts of roles? That's not going to be an overnight change. I think it's quite a privilege from that women who are in office-based roles can work at home. I think that's not just for women but for men. That is a real privilege. But I think there has been some real hard people hit by COVID, and I think the majority of them have unfortunately been women. I think there was a recent study in, I think it was the latest McKinsey article around, unpaid work versus paid work, and women are still doing 26 hours of unpaid work, keeping house, etc., looking after, caring responsibilities, compared to men who have 16 hours a week. So I think there's still an imbalance there, even when all the family unit is at home. So I think there's still some work to be done.
Maybe we move on to the next question, Matt, and I might stay with Jess on this one. So question 2, when it comes to inclusion and diversity, what do you think are the priorities for businesses today then, Jess, given that context?
Yes, I think there was a lot of research, a lot of great work actually being done before COVID hit, you know, in the field of equality and diversity inclusion. You know, just as Kay said, that the business case has been made very clear that if you have diversity at your sort of top levels all the way through the business, you know, your business will be more profitable. You gain an edge on the competition. But I think that change was quite painfully slow. And I guess in some organisations it wasn't potentially even on the agenda. And then you sort of fast forward to 2020 and businesses had to change very rapidly because of COVID. You know, people had to consider how and where they worked, whereas, you know, Wendy said that, you know, that probably wasn't even considered or even actually, you know, frowned upon from business's point of view. You know, flexible working, well, no, we don't do that here. Well, guess what, 2020 you've had to. So I think, you know, through the sort of lens of the crisis, flexible working has been put into businesses. But I think now the momentum's there, really we need to look you know, at a more in-depth level of what does flexibility mean for people, not just women, but men as well. You know, all the things that I guess, you know, stop women progressing potentially their careers are also the things that stop men caring at home and having the caring responsibilities. So I think, you know, there needs to be equity on the flexible working view, I think. I think organisations clearly need to prioritise diversity and inclusion. Like I said, you know, it affects the bottom line ultimately. But how do they do that? You know, they need to understand what the playing field is before they even level it. So I think then, if they haven't already, they need to look at bringing those skills into the organisations. There's great membership organisations that can support with really understanding inclusion and diversity. Or, you know, if you haven't got it in your business, hire in people with those skills and expertise that can really look at systems, processes, policies, and really get into the detail. We know that training helps. We know that training managers in terms of biases and, you know, unconscious biases helps. But it can't just be done once and that's it. It's a continuation of, you know, coaching method really, in terms of really looking at where biases are, not just in people and systems, but in, you know, policies and process. And there's ways that you can design systems and processes now that removes those sort of cognitive biases out. So I think that there's something to be done there from businesses in terms of, you know, really getting into the sort of unconscious and cognitive biases. I think in terms of, you know, leaders and role models, they need to be the role models. They need to lead this change. And probably in most organisations, you still find the majority of those leadership or executive teams, you know, are not from those sort of minority backgrounds or diverse fields. So, you know, it's the majority that really has the power to change. So again, I'd probably ask organisations, if they're prioritising inclusion and diversity, not to move that burden, if you like, or move the sort of problem to be fixed to the minority groups, because it's a hard thing to push a car uphill. It's much easier for the majority to be able to drive it down and make change. So I think, you know, there's lots that can be done. Bringing skills into the business if they're not there already, really looking at, you know, the cognitive biases, the pieces that they, you know, policies, systems, processes, and using that momentum that's really here right now because of COVID, and moving forward with it. So hopefully we'll see some change.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. Laura, maybe I kind of pull you into this topic as well, actually. I know we spoke about this the other day. Is there anything else that you've seen businesses do well in this, or anything else you think we should be focused on as organisations?
Yeah, I do believe that business should be really running away from the wait and see sort of attitude that the current global scenario on COVID-19 is leading to sometimes. So I do think that the level of uncertainty, the level of pressure on results and visibility sometimes get organization and business a bit stuck in a wait and see kind of attitude. And in this, I think that the inclusion and diversity is really a massive asset. And why is that? Because I do think that business needs to urgently deploy different idea, out of the box idea to build the future and resist and be resilient to what is happening. And in order to achieve this, I do think that the better approach is really to bring at the table different ideas, different background, breakthrough idea, and there be brave enough to listen, to build projects, and to deploy actions around those, and challenge ourselves into the day-to-day comfort zone of what we know and what we believe we know the best. That's the danger. So the way to open up for leaders, but as well for any angle, from any point of view in the organization, I think will bring a breath of oxygen and will give more possibility to the companies and to the individual to grow. So more than ever, what I've experienced is work through cross-functional teams on project idea, on how to run a business differently, on how to build efficiency, but as well to create a bit beyond the boundaries of role responsibility as well. What is happening is here to stay for a while, and it's really changed a lot. Our environment, our way to live, and to be professional. So we need to embrace this also within the companies and leverage this in the day-to-day. And it's a big shot, but as well as a day-to-day exercise. And we need to extend and challenge ourselves to accept this into the way we work with our colleague, more and more virtual, but as well more and more listening and asking questions and trying to capitalize. That's the only way to get out of this with a better, a more solid look at the future. And this will bring opportunity to grow, opportunity to reinforce diversity and inclusion. And that's the only way, because we know what we know, but we don't know what we don't know. And in this moment, we desperately need to factorize all the possible points of view, whatever level in the organization, wherever they're coming from. And diversity is the key. If you just choose what you know, people that are good at that, to do that, that will not work, because we are requested to really jump into a different dimension and to build on that. That's the great somehow challenge and opportunity we have, and inclusion and diversity as a really walking the talk of what this means into our daily job is a key success factor, I do believe.
Yeah, there's lots to do, and there's significant change that will need to happen to get through this. So yeah, completely agree. How about we move to the next question, Matt? Which is, I'm going to bring this one to Naintara first, actually. Are double standards at play at work? And if so, what advice would you give to overcome them?
So having been working in mostly a male-dominated society and companies, I think it would be hard for me to say that double standards are not at play. I think there is double standard on acceptable behavior. For men, profanities is considered banter, aggression is considered ambition, but the same behavior for women is not acceptable. I also feel that women have to continuously prove their worth. They have to prove their competence to make sure, or to, you know, there's this looming thing everywhere that, you know, they got the job because of their gender, not because of their competence, which I think is truly a double standard. And unfortunately, even in 2020, I think appearances still matter, which is shocking. I mean, only recently, one of my colleagues told me that they got in a 360 feedback by a male group. One of their feedbacks was that they should improve their dressing, which I thought was extremely shocking. So double standards are still at play. So what can we do about it? I think first and foremost, we need to increase awareness. And I think events like these are very helpful in getting our word out there that there are issues with this. I'm often surprised when I speak to my friends and male colleagues that they don't really believe that double standards exist. In fact, some of them believe that they are to the advantage of women, which is very surprising. Secondly, as Jess said, we need role models. We need role models to be in senior leadership positions to show that work can be done while being true to ourselves. It's hard to be someone else for so long. So we need to be true to ourselves, work to our strengths, and get the job done. So I think there's a lot to do in this area.
Wendy, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I was actually going to say something very, very similar. You know, about staying true to yourself, and I think that's the key. Stay true to yourself and speak up for what you actually believe in. You are in your job for a reason, not because, you know, you this or that. Or, you know, I work in marketing, which is less male dominant, obviously, but it's seen as fluff within the business. So I have that prejudice against me, and then being blonde as well. So I've constantly had to prove myself, my worth, and like I said, I think it's just to stay true to yourself and speak up for what you believe in. I think women are more empathic in general, but I also think, and people could often confuse it as being too emotional, but I think actually it makes us better leaders because we have that intuition that helps us connect with others that potentially, you know, male people, you know, not judging all of them, but they may not have that intuition that we have. So we can be more in tune with ourselves, with people, and I think that's a great skill to have. And there's a fine balance, I think, between standing up for what you believe in and being perceived as being aggressive. And like Naintara said, men may not be perceived as such, but women may be. But I think often when you're being perceived as being aggressive, it often comes from other people's insecurities, rather than you know, you being true to yourself. So yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with speaking up and knowing your worth and effectively influencing other people, you know, and leading others with your intuition. So how we can convince people as well is, I think, women sadly always have to work harder to prove their worth, and I think if you bring people along, like a piece of advice I would give, if you want to bring people along and convince them, you have to bring them in your journey. And I think sadly women often have a bigger job to do there, to you know, to understand that when you ask for something, it's truly based on something more rational as well as your emotions. So I think from my perspective, you know, we probably have to back it up with a bit more research, a bit more data, but ultimately, you know, we will make a difference, I think, by just being women ourselves and staying true to that sixth sense that we have.
Authentic self. Any other thoughts from the panel of tips of how they've maybe managed this scenario?
I think we very often get classified, I know I certainly have, as being an aggressive person, just for voicing your opinion, and so you tend to try and kind of swallow down things that perhaps because you start to become very conscious that might not be welcome, that comment might not be welcome. Maybe I should just roll that back. Somebody mentioned earlier that actually they feel in the last 3 to 5 years it's become more acceptable to bring your whole self to work. And I would agree with that. I think that people are waking up, CEOs are waking up to the fact that if you hear everybody and really hear everybody, then you're going to have a much more successful team around you. And I've certainly found that people are more accepting of your opinion over the last, certainly more recently. My wish is that women starting their careers now don't have to swallow back their opinions, and that their opinions are valid as their counterparts. I think we've probably all had situations where people think that you're a bit aggressive, so perhaps you should just because you're supposed to smile nicely and say nice things and be more comfortable, make other people more comfortable about the fact that you're around the table. We should not have to apologize for our gender. We should not have to apologize for the fact that we have an opinion. And I do think that that's getting better, but we still have so much work to do. I would also like to say that we've been going through a project on diversity and inclusion on our board, and it's a challenge. To Laura's point about we need to be creative, THB in the UK is not a big company, and so as we look around us to see what other people have done that has been a success, I really still think that we struggle to look at any firms and say, actually, they've nailed it. They've done a really good job. So we have to come up with our own ideas, because what everybody has been doing so far hasn't moved the needle to a sufficient extent. So we need to think differently. We need to have creative people around the table, which means people who think differently, to come up with the ideas of how we can change things, how we can move the needle.
Interesting. So I'm going to move us on to the last question before we maybe have some time for Q&A. And it may be Kay, we stick with you on this one, because we've got a lot of people on the call who are going to be listening in and needing advice. So would you give the same advice to men and women looking to advance their career? And if not, what would be the difference and why?
I think that I would be contradicting myself if I was to give women different advice to men. The way that I built my career was by hard work and by asking for more. So I always pushed myself. When I got my first job, I was always pushing, I was always achieving. I've done that piece. Now what else have you got for me to do? Now what else have you got for me to do? And if you don't have anything else for me to do, then I'm going to be looking somewhere else for something to do that's going to challenge me. I've always wanted to be challenged in what it is that I do on a day-to-day basis. I've always wanted to achieve, and I'm always looking at the next thing that needs to improve. The way that my brain works, I like to solve problems, I like to fix things. So I'm always looking for the next problem that needs to be fixed, and then the next problem that needs to be fixed. And so I think I've been very fortunate in that I've had managers over the years, actually all of them male, but who have always encouraged me to continue to do that. Whether that's luck or whether you make your own luck, I don't know, but I've always, that's what I say to my team, is put your hand up, ask for something else. Don't just sit on your laurels. It's important that your manager knows that you want to progress, that you have an ambition, and that there are things that you want to do, and so they will give you more. If there is somebody in my team who wants more advancement and who wants advice and who wants help, then I don't think there is a manager out there that wouldn't want to help somebody progress in that way. So I think it's about being vocal and open about your ambition and putting your hand up.
Laura, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I've been 20 years in a male-dominated industry, so I can share my key points, and I hope that will be helpful to some of you. So I've learned to be confident in the way I bet on people, supporting diversity. And I've always stick to the principle of giving back, closing the loop. I've been lucky enough to be given opportunity to growth. I think I've paid back on those opportunities. And I felt constantly that I had to give back in a way and give chances to other people. So walking the talk is paramount important. And the way we can give back, whatever role we have, and be consistent with the principle of inclusion and diversity will make us stronger as individual and as a team and a company, but primarily will help us to be brave and stronger. And well, after a few years, I've learned also that we shouldn't be afraid to fail. That happens. And you take it, you digest it, it hurts, but then you go to the next. And also the fact to accept to be less than perfect, for me, it was a big achievement in a way to move forward and not really accept 100% perfect like the standard. You can move ahead. In some cases, you can move ahead, and you need to. And the resilience you have, the energy, the curiosity you have will bring you. And that's what was my experience. And I've always asked myself, what could I do? What I could have done differently to help on this front when it comes to help others to progress, to growth. And I'm trying to give answer to this on a really practical terms in my day-to-day life when I decide and I work with other individuals, whatever was and whatever it is in the organization. So I think pragmatic approach in the day-to-day life is key, and be confident when you bet and then create consensus around your bet. That's the way I would share my experience and hopefully some tips for you.
It's interesting. I've often heard that women want more perfection, and it often holds them back on maybe applying for that next role because they think they haven't got everything. They don't tick all those boxes that they can then move forward, and men just go for it. So it's interesting.
Be bold, go for it, stand up, and you will prove and you will discover more than what you think you can achieve, and be ambitious. That's it. And you will create consensus around. You may fail, that's it. You will stand up again. No fear.
Matt, I know we're kind of getting towards the end, so I wondered if we had any questions coming through that we should take a look at.
We do. We have a couple of questions. First questions come in. So as a female HR professional, how do you start the dialogue with the male-dominated board to embrace diversity at board level and the organisation?
Jess, I think this one's for you.
I was going to pass to Jess, yeah.
You start the dialogue by proving the point around profitability. You know, the fact that a diverse leadership team, exec team, board, whatever it may be, will affect the bottom line for the good of the organisation. I think, you know, the business case is clear, and I think that gets the attention. So then, how do you go about that? I think, like we've all said, it's about role modelling and the behaviours you expect, and not settling for substandard behaviours or, you know, microaggressions in the workplace, those sorts of things. And I also think it's important for that board to make a quite visible commitment. So not only role modelling, but making a commitment, whether that is through policy, whether that's through some sort of charter, whether that's through you know, training, for the teams. But yeah, you start the dialogue with the pound notes, and it goes from there.
Great, thanks, Jess. Okay, another question that's come in is, if there's one defining moment in your career, what is it and why? And that wasn't asked of anybody specifically, so it'd be quite interesting to hear from you, some of you.
I think from my perspective, you know, I've always been super hardworking, and you know, when I was younger, you know, in my 20s, I was really ambitious, and like Kay said, I was going for it, and I always wanted more and always wanted to prove myself, and you know, I wanted to get there and higher and higher and higher. And to an extent, I was working, you know, till 1 o'clock in the morning, trying to perfect that piece that I needed to present, you know, business plans or whatever it may have been. And I was just working all the time. And in the end, I thought, oh, God, I'm so exhausted. So I started an experiment with myself. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to try, and my husband actually was very influential, because he's very much 80% is good enough. Don't go for perfection. It's fine. 80%. So I thought, okay, I'll try that 80%. And I started finishing on time, still working hard, but trying to beat my own perfectionism and not being so perfect. And the feedback I had in my next review was, oh my God, Wendy, you worked so hard. This was amazing. No one could have done what you've done. And I thought, oh my God, I've worked half of what I've usually worked, and it still was good enough. So that to me was the defining moment. And I still work hard, but to me, I think it's more now about actually having a balance in life outside of work, which was a true eye-opener, and I would recommend to anyone.
Thanks, Wendy. That's great advice. Anybody else want to talk about the defining moment?
Well, I can really share one moment years ago when I was a treasurer in a listed company, and I was given the opportunity to get out of the role and leading the so-called sales and business operation, which wasn't clearly defined as a role, was a new one. And my point was, well, I'm giving up on clear business card in the market, a treasurer of an international company listed, for a role that is starting from zero, and what it is. I mean, it couldn't really be defined precisely. Job description was very much work in progress, but I did trust the CEO at that time, the new CEO who came in, and I started to know with this discussion around the role and the way we would have built that role. And I decided to accept the role. Really, it was a blind kind of decision for my standards. And that was the first time I left finance. Then I went back to finance. But it was the first time I really decided not having all the elements that were standard elements for me for a decision. Know exactly what you need to do, know exactly what is expected, know exactly the role responsibility. And I went for something totally new, into a huge transformation of the company, which I then discovered I was a key element, but then after a couple of years. So that was for me a very difficult decision, and the shocking elements for the good. And I've always remembered this, even if it was 15 years ago. And I jumped across boundaries that I thought I couldn't have ever done. And that creates much more value for me in my career path than many other steps I did, because I built from scratch, and I've decided out of the box of my usual criteria.
The word that comes to mind is bravery. It's just, you know, sometimes you have to be brave to take those moves, and not have everything. Interesting.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else?
Yeah, I'd agree with Laura. I think I mean, mine was still within finance, but it was a geographical move. It was which for me was quite a big deal. So I was moved from outside of London into London at a point where most people move from London to outside of London, and so that was an enormous jump for me. Just in terms of culture, we all know that kind of more regional firms have a different work-life balance to London-based firms, and so for me I was joining a company that was at the start of a growth journey, and it was a risk. It was a risk that I took, but I took it for my career. I thought, no, I've got to make this jump at some point. Why not make it now? So we upsticked and moved to London, and it was hard work settling in, and yeah, I've worked very hard for 6 years, but it was worth it. So I think that taking the risk at some point, taking that leap of faith, is definitely made a difference for me.
Thanks, Kay. Jenny, I think, have we got time for one more question, do you think, or?
Squeeze one in, go on.
Yeah, okay, so one last question. How do you move your career forward when you work really hard and smart, but feel that by asking for work-life balance, that destroys the opportunity to progress? Does anybody want to pick that one up?
I think you find the right company. You find the right company that's going to support that and support that for everybody else. And I think, all anybody wants from work, I think, is to find the role that's going to suit their skills, that's going to give them autonomy, get a sense of community, and I think that they have a purpose. And if you get that right, and you get a supportive company that understands diversity and inclusion, you will get the job of your dreams.
Thanks, Jess. Okay, Jenny, I think that's probably time.
Yeah,
we're almost at the hour.
Thank you so much. So we probably could have had another 20 questions and carried on this discussion. It's been really interesting and fascinating to hear the stories and the perspectives of our panelists. So again, a massive thank you for you to get up early and join us. It's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you to everyone that's joined us early morning on the call as well. I hope you found this really valuable and insightful. We do have another session tomorrow morning if you want another early start. We're talking about the future of work tomorrow morning, same time, 8:30, which will be on our website, and we'll upload this webinar later on as well. But just I'll close up, say thank you to all, have a wonderful day, and take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.